Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hello.
And I want to thank Barbara for asking me to share. It's always a privilege and an honor to be allowed to share in any capacity in an AA meeting, as far as I'm concerned. It's also remarkable for me to be standing here. I mean, think about it. I'm a self-admitted liar, not through malice necessarily, but I spent most of my time in sobriety, in delusion or denial. And the only lessons I've ever learned on this program, I've generally learned by making mistakes and screwing it up. I haven't learned any other way. So it's nice that there's an audience here to listen while I try and say what happened and what it's like, and what it's like today. What it's like today, I have to admit, I need a disclaimer. There used to be a line of commercials on TV, I think they were Ford or Chevy trucks, where they were out competing who made the toughest truck. And so they were driving trucks over cliffs and over rocks and through rivers and all kinds of other things. And while that was going on, there was a message that flashed about on the bottom of the screen that said, these stunts were done by a professional stunt driver in specially equipped vehicles. Please do not try this at home. I've always thought podiums ought to have a message like that. Please do not try this at home. Because as I say, everything I've done has been through mistake and through misunderstandings of what goes on in the program. Where I've gotten from that is God has been really good to me. A statement that I could not make when I came in here 25 years ago. The use of the word God in a sentence would not have been possible 25 years ago. And yet here I am making that statement and looking at the things that are, the benefits that have come to me through the grace of God and through this program. I'm almost done with my 50th year of being alive. That may not sound like much to you, but it's been a hell of a good year. And I didn't expect to ever see it. Hell, I didn't expect to see 30. When I got into a treatment center, about a year after I got out of the treatment center that I entered 25 years ago, one of the nurses that I made friends with let me in on a little secret. When I got there was a pool involving me. And the pool was, whose shift would I die on? And they had money going on it, and I disappointed them. And it's been like that, every minute that I've had since I got sober has been a bonus. I didn't expect it. I have done nothing to earn it. I couldn't do anything to earn it. It's all been a gift from God. I've managed to get other gifts in my life. Earlier this month, I was privileged to celebrate the first anniversary of a relationship with a wonderful lady who also has time on the program, who is as crazy as I am, and is willing to overlook my craziness. And we've been able to put together a real relationship based on honesty and showing up and being present without any attempts to impress the other one. And it has not been easy. It's been rocky, because I don't know how to do that. Hell, I don't know how to live life on a daily basis. And if you think that if you don't know how to live life on a daily basis, it gets easier when you're trying to plan a future with someone and live one day at a time at the same time, it's an impossibility. But I have the privilege of being able to walk through that and try that, one day at a time, to plan a future. And it's been more than I could have ever hoped for or asked for even in my wildest romantic fantasies. It's more than I could hope for based upon who I am and where I came from and what happened. I'll go back way to the beginning. I was raised in a military family, the oldest son, the oldest child in a family of 5 kids. I can summarize it by saying that by the time I was 16 and entered my junior year of high school, that was my 12th school in 11 states. I lived in 20 houses by that time. And I'm not saying that because I'm blaming anyone for anything. I'm aware that my parents did what they thought was right. There was a Cold War going on at the time, and Dad was in good faith believing that he was keeping the world safe for democracy. God bless him. But and you know, it's all my reaction to things. It's not what happened, it's how I reacted. And how I reacted was quite simply, I became very good at learning how to say hello. I became very, very good at learning how to say goodbye. I became good at realizing that there were no consequences for my action. By the time people found out about it, I was going to move anyway, so what? I got to see an awful lot of the country. I got a lot of facts. I had little connection with any place. Everywhere I went, I was always the new kid. I was a stranger. I had no idea who these other folks were, and everybody else knew who they were. What was what, where it was, what the rules were, and I was playing catch-up everywhere I went. My life can be summarized as that. Everywhere I have gone, I have been a stranger, and everybody around me knows who's who, and I have no clue. And I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to figure it out while looking cool and not letting on that I haven't a clue as to what's going on. There was a lady I heard from this very podium one time explain it better than I can. She said she could remember back to just before she was born. Me, I can't remember back before I was 8. But she said it was like a large waiting room with all the souls waiting to be born. And she said she remembers having to go to the bathroom. And when she was out of the room, the people who came down with the owner's manuals for how to be human came around and distributed the owner's manuals, the angels, if you will. And she came out of the bathroom, and everyone was reading the manuals, and she was trying to peek at everybody else's copy. She ran after whoever it was, and they were gone already, so she didn't get a copy, and it was her turn. She was born. And so she arrived knowing everyone else had all the rules, all the instructions, except her. I could identify with that, because that's how it's felt. At some point in my life, and I know exactly when it was, I discovered there was a cure for that feeling. Because one more time I was in that situation where I had no idea what was going on. It was new. I'd moved again. I was off at college. I went to a very exclusive school that was hard to get into, and which was male only at the time. And you know, one more time, I was out of my element, out of my league. I had no idea what's going on. We allowed off campus twice the first semester, and that's it. And so what was traditional was all of the freshmen would get together and pool their money and rent a couple of cars, find someone old enough to get some booze, rent a couple of motel rooms at the nearest big city 60 miles away. And someone would also know how to contact a sorority, and so we would have a party for one night. And I remember going to my first one, and there was booze, and I was sipping, and after a while something magical happened to me. I don't think it happened to anybody else in that room. At least I don't know it did. But all of a sudden, it didn't matter that I didn't know who was here. It didn't matter that I was, nothing mattered. I could talk to the girls. I could dance. I don't dance, but I could dance. And I could carry on a conversation without stumbling over my own tongue. And the rest of it, the fact that I was in a place I didn't like, didn't matter. And the fact that I was going back to one in a couple of hours didn't matter. Nothing mattered. And I was in heaven. And I kept drinking more of that stuff just to make sure that effect stayed, because that was the best I'd felt in years. And then I went out in the parking lot and puked my guts up and came back in to have some more so I could still maintain that feeling. And the second time we were allowed off campus, we did the same exact thing, and I had the same exact results. And what happened as I was leaving is I found a bottle of rum that hadn't been opened, and I smuggled it back. Now, you have to know that this place had daily inspections where they went through your entire room, and that having alcohol on campus was immediate expulsion. And I'd wanted to go to this place for about 6 years before I got there. It had been a dream that I'd worked for. And I smuggled it anyway. And I drank it on campus. And when that was gone, I discovered Colgate's 100 mouthwash was 25% alcohol. And it was available in the student store. And I had the freshest breath on campus until I left. I just couldn't get this idea of spitting it out down. And I used to think that, it took me a long time to become an alcoholic, but, that's alcoholic drinking. I went immediately to such things as mouthwash, whatever was available. Not to make me feel good. I can't remember any time that I ever drank and felt high. I drank to maintain. I drank to feel equal to everyone around me, because I always felt lesser than. And I could look at some of my accomplishments and, I'd say, well, yeah, that may be true, but so what? I couldn't feel that I ever belonged anywhere that I was. And alcohol at least gave me a magical way of not feeling that. Now, I'll give you a secret. If alcohol could still do that for me, I'd be drinking it today. It was that good. The problem was somewhere in my drinking, it stopped working. Somewhere I could drink as much as was available, as much was on hand, and go get some more, and it still wouldn't give me that feeling that everything was okay. That was much later in my drinking. And basically, when that happened, I was screwed. Because I now had no out, no solution, nothing to take away that pain and the emptiness and the loneliness. That's what I drank about. I couldn't handle emotions. I really couldn't manage that at all. I walked around all of the time with a big cannonball in the center of my stomach of fear. Not a knot, a cannonball. Dissolvable only in a solution of alcohol. Worked wonders. Until it stopped. I did a lot of strange things on that. Alcohol got me to go places I wouldn't ordinarily go, do things I wouldn't ordinarily do. And everyone has a story, and I could regale you with drunken episodes. But that's not really the point. I mean, I figure you guys know how to drink as well as I do, and I can't really talk to you about from the podium about that. That's not what the program's about. My problem was how to get rid of the alcohol that wasn't working and how to go through life without blowing my brains out. Because that was my next solution of choice. When I couldn't stand where I was, who I was, what I was doing. I got lucky. At one point, I finally decided I need to ask for help. And it wasn't when I first realized it wasn't working. You know, I had more stuff to do, more to go down, before I could even think of asking for help. I had to go past the place where, on the day that I looked in the mirror one morning and looked at the image looking back on me and realized that everything that was human had been stripped away. Past the point where I could look at that thing and say, once you take a drink, you can't predict what your next action is going to be. And I looked at myself and realized I was at that point and I still hadn't drank. I worked a lot under denial and delusion. I could believe many impossible things. I remember one morning as I was, my usual morning routine was to get up, grab a glass of Rainier Ale, try and get that down before I throw up, and then try and get another one down. Figuring that if I could keep the second one down, it was going to be an okay day. And I remember one time going through that ritual and hugging the toilet and thinking to myself, if you're throwing up, maybe you have a problem. Just maybe. Nothing definite. And immediately the thought came to my mind, no, it's okay, everybody does this. Now, I had perfect evidence that a year before this event, I was not throwing up on a daily basis, but somehow I believed that everybody in the world got up and threw up. And it took me years to realize I believed that. Some of the things that I thought of, some of the ways I justified my behavior just astound me today. And they were as sincere as they could be. My story is I entered a treatment program. I asked for help of a next-door neighbor. One day when I was supposed to the best of my knowledge, register for class the next day for a graduate program I was in. And I was supposed to go back to work that day, and did, and I took my thermos of beer, as I always had, and I was fixing radios and TVs at the time, and I looked at the first one, I put it on my bench, and I took it all apart, and I looked at it, and I went off and had a drink of beer, and I looked at it, and I had another drink. I went through my quart thermos, realizing that I'm supposed to know how to do this, and I can't figure it out. Something I'd been doing for 15 years by that point, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so I went home and I looked, and another thing I noticed is for some reason I had to write my name on something, and I couldn't read my handwriting. And so I went to my next door neighbor, because there was no one else around. My wife at the time had left again. I was always this close to things. I hadn't lost a job yet. I was still married. Of course, she had moved out twice on me and was consulting an attorney, but I was still married. Everything was okay. I was still in school. Everything was okay. And on the inside, I was dying. And I couldn't fill that hole in my stomach anymore. And my next door neighbor was a widow, and I had heard obliquely that her husband used to drink maybe to excess and had blown his brains out over it. And lacking any other idea of what to do, I went next door and I knocked on the door and said, this is my situation. I have to register. I can't focus. I can't write. Nothing seems to be working. I need to slow down my drinking for just a day so I can get through this. What did your husband do? Now, it's not much of a cry for help, but that was the best I could do under the circumstances. And she said, well, I don't remember really. Now, realizing that his solution had been to blow his brains out, she was being very kind to me. But she said, I know a doctor in town who seems to have some information on the subject, and I'll put you in touch with him. So she did, and I got a call from the doctor, and I talked to him, and I explained my situation, that I had to go to school the next day and register. And he was trying to talk to me about a 2-month treatment program. I said, no, you don't understand. I can't do 2 months before tomorrow. And he said, finally got tired of discussing it with me and said, why don't you just go down and check yourself in, tell him I sent you, and tell him to fix you up. Said, no problem. Had a few more beers, got in the car, drove down there. Went through the whole song and dance with the staff down there. And they said, 2-month program. I said, no, I have to leave tomorrow. They finally got tired of arguing with me and said, fine, why don't you check in? We'll give you some pajamas, give you vitamin B shots, and if you want to check out tomorrow, you can. Well, they knew full well I wasn't going anywhere. When I got there, my skin was a bright yellow. My liver was shutting down. My eyes were not focusing on the same thing. One was going one way, one was going the other. My clothes and my body smelled of alcohol, not just fresh alcohol, but the alcoholic smell you get after you've had a skinful for months and months and months. I had been round the clock drinking, and I was going to get out the next day. 4 hours later, the shakes hit, the DTs hit. Life became real interesting. And the next morning, I was ready to go home. And they basically convinced me that I could have my clothes back, but they took away every reason I had for staying. They patched up, they made a phone call to work and got that taken care of. They made a phone call to school and got the word that I had a leave of absence, and best wishes from the dean. Now, there's a story behind that. 17 years later, I'm going through some papers, and I discover that I had already applied for a leave of absence the previous April. This is August. I had been granted a leave of absence and best wishes. They weren't expecting me to register the next day. Had I shown up, they would have had no idea what to do with me, which made more than us. I stayed through the program, and basically what it did was introduce me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had no intention of joining Alcoholics Anonymous. My first introduction was when I asked somebody, okay, now that I'm here, I asked one of the inmates, now that I'm here, what do we have to do to get out? And he handed me a big book, the first one I'd ever seen, opened it to chapter 5 where it had the 12 steps, and said, well, these are the steps that we have to take. I said, okay, and I started reading, and the first one was okay. I am powerless over alcohol and my life has become unmanageable. Well, I figured if my life was manageable, I wouldn't be sitting in this hospital bed, in this, designer pajamas, and disposable slippers, covered with cigarette ash because I can't hold a cigarette straight. My forelock was all burned because I couldn't, and my nose was all burned because I couldn't hold the match. It took 2 hands to get the match to the cigarette. And I figured, yeah, maybe my life's a little bit unmanageable. This isn't what I want. And if you guys want to say that it's alcohol that did this, my best friend did this to me, if you want to say that, I'll go along with it because I ran out of ideas myself. I had run out of ideas a long time ago. I had tried quitting many times. One of the things I later discovered, if you try quit, if it's so good, why am I trying to quit? It never occurred to me that there was a problem there. My longest period of quitting before I got there was 4 hours. Did that many times. Generally, at the end of 4 hours, one of 2 things would happen. Either I would forget that I was quitting and take a drink, or be so pleased with my progress that I had to reward myself, oh, you're way ahead of me, by taking a drink. But I stayed there, went to my first AA meeting. Oh, the guy showed me the steps and I got through the first one okay, but the second one began to make me real nervous. See, I came to believe that a capital P power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I knew what was coming. And sure enough, third step, there it is. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And at that point, the book went flying across the room. And I screamed, "Not me, no how, fuck you, forget about it." And that was the last conscious moment that I had for about a day. But as I said, I'd run out of solutions. I had nowhere else to go. I had tried everything that my fertile imagination was capable of, and it had always failed. And I went to my first AA meeting, and the one thing I heard before I went into convulsions and they hustled me out of there was laughter. I knew these were people who had stories like mine, and I heard a wave of laughter coming out of the meeting room as I walked in. And I wanted to laugh like that. I realized I hadn't had a belly laugh since I could remember. And I've been chasing the laughter in meetings ever since. I don't know if it matters what, the prime purpose of getting here is, as long as you get here and stay here. But I chased the laughter. My second meeting, one that I did stay awake through and not have DTs for, there was a fellow there who was celebrating 10 years of sobriety. And they gave him a cake and sang and did everything that we do here. And I absolutely, positively knew it was impossible to stay sober for 10 years. That everybody in the room was lying to me, that it was all a put on for my benefit, and I was pissed. And I spent the next 6 months, both in and out of the treatment program, going to meetings, listening carefully, asking questions, for the purpose of being able to prove that this was a hoax. And at the end of 6 months of asking those kind of questions and going to meetings, I found something. I found I was 6 months sober. And I've stayed around ever since. I got really lucky. At some point, something took. I was really ready to hear a solution. I had hit as low a bottom as I could hit and still walk away from it. Now, I'd like to tell you that it was all peaches and cream, roses and sunshine ever after. It really hasn't been. It's been a real slow growth process for me. I've had to work the steps and work them and rework them and make all the mistakes that I know how to make, both with and without advice. And all I can say is I was really fortunate that God got me sober at that particular time and at that particular place. One of the things that I was really fortunate about is once I started getting a little bit well, my rebelliousness started coming back, very rebellious. And I realized at some point later that I was waiting for someone to stick their finger up under my nose and say, you have to do this, you can't do that, just once. And the bastards never gave me the satisfaction, because I was ready to run. I was looking for an excuse to get out. And no one ever did that for me. What they did was something which was just so seductive that it's unreal. They told me whenever I was screaming about something, and I screamed a lot, they'd look at me rather calmly and say, well, you know, I don't know what you're going to do, but I was in a similar situation once, and this is what I did, and this is what happened, and if you want to try it, maybe the same thing will happen for you. And I can't say I've ever had a directive on this program. No one's ever told me what to do, but they've given me their solution. Now, how do you argue with someone who's telling their story? How do you argue with someone else's experience? I couldn't figure out a way to. And so I had to sit and listen and stick around. And sometimes good things happened, and sometimes not so good things happened. I stuck around, and at the end of a year, I surprised myself by staying a year. I surprised myself so much that I was sitting at my home group meeting, and it was a participation meeting, and we got around to sharing, and I just sort of said, you know, I don't know how this happened, but 1 year ago today, I stopped drinking. And the next week, they threw me a birthday. They gave me a cake. And it was just, I hadn't told them. And I had no idea how that happened. Because I couldn't think of anything I was doing that made that happen. And another year passed, and they had elections for group secretary. And someone nominated me, and it so surprised me that I swallowed my gum, and before I could protest, they elected me secretary. And I actually managed that for a year. And in that particular area of the country, the secretary does everything from set up to make coffee to clean up afterwards and handle the money. And I almost couldn't give it up at the end of a year because I'd borrowed from the Treasury. And I figured I couldn't quit until I'd paid it all back. But I did. And as soon as that happened and I was clear of that one, they had another election, and I was in the bathroom this time, and they made me GSR. And I stumbled into, on this program, so many wonderful opportunities to learn and grow. And to be of service. I think I was 3 weeks sober when I ended up going on my first 12-step call on a wet drunk. We did a lot of that back then. And at one point I was looking around and I realized, none of the people I've gone on 12-step calls have ever stayed sober. And I was complaining to my sponsor about that one time, and he said, "You missed the point. You are." And I had to realize, my perceptions get all out of whack, and they still do on this program. Now, as I said, it's not been all roses. At about 13 years of sobriety, actually the week of my 13th birthday, the woman that I'd married before I got sober, who came back after I got sober, and I separated. My 13th birthday. And I had to move down here and make a life for myself. And I did that. And just before our 21st anniversary, just a week before, the divorce was final. Now, it's tough to blow away a 21-year marriage, and especially do it in sobriety, and I was screaming at God all the while, why me, why now? Why now, especially when I have no anesthetic that I can use? Nothing to take away the pain. And sometime after that, I moved back up to that area because I had a son who was indicating that he missed his father and needed one around, and he knew that he was one of the few who didn't have a dad. And I moved back, and everything ended. A job that I moved back to take to that state disappeared as soon as I got there. And I was one more time without friends, without people that I knew, in a strange city, and I didn't know the rules, and I apparently was screwing them up anyway. And I went crazy for a while in sobriety. 16, 17 years, the only thing I could say at a meeting, the only share that I could make was the following. If you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink. And even if you want to drink, you don't have to drink. That's the only thing I could get out of that period. I went through a period of intense depression and pain in sobriety, working the steps, trying to figure out how, if I'm working the steps and being such a good boy and doing everything that's required of me for 16 years, why is this happening? And I found myself in the very awkward position of sitting in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and wanting to be rewarded for having accepted the gift of sobriety. I wanted something more. And I couldn't figure out why the good things were happening to everybody but me. And it was one of the darkest and blackest periods of my life. 2 years later, when I came out the other side with a lot of help, with outside therapy, it finally dawned on me that that had been the biggest year of growth in my life. I had grown more in that 1 year than I had in the previous 16. And I had thought it was the worst year of my life, and in many ways it turned out to be the best year of my life. In that year I had to do everything, including fire the higher power that I had because he wasn't working, and find another one. And that gets scary. That's real scary. I was standing on the edge of the abyss. But I got through it. How? Same way I'd always done it. Through the grace of God, through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had the great fortune to have people come into my life at just the right time to say the right thing. I found myself surrounded by people who could teach me that I could have emotions without dying, that I didn't have to fall apart to have emotions, and who actually taught me that emotions are something that God gave me anyway. So why am I fighting it? I would go through even deeper trauma. About 1.5 years ago, my almost 14-year-old son committed suicide. I had talked to him 2 days before and 3 days before for a long time on the phone, and he seemed to be chipper and full of life and as bouncy and bright as ever. And 2 days later, he hung himself. And I got the call at about 4:30 that afternoon from, it was a work day, Monday, April 15th. Believe it or not, I'll never forget that day. And I got the call from his mother telling me that he'd committed suicide. And you know what happened through the grace of this program? I got the privilege of trying to be of comfort and service to my ex-wife. And she let me do that. She had every reason to hate my guts. She had gone through me drinking. She had gone through me sober. We'd gone through a breakup of the marriage. It wasn't pleasant. And yet, I was able to be of service. Why? Because I'd worked the program. Because I'd done the amends. My side of the street was clear. Now, that's not me, folks. I don't know how to do that on my own. But I had the ability to do that day because of everything I had done before. And I was able to see at that moment that everything that ever happened in my life was based upon other things that had happened in my life, and that everything that I did today was based upon the sum, the product of everything I have ever done, ever been. That's not just the good things, that's all the bad things that I did are absolutely necessary for me to stand here at this podium tonight. Change one, delete one, I'm not here. It's not my plan. And I'm clearly able to see it's not my plan. That's God's plan. And after I got off the phone, I said the only prayer that I can say under those circumstances. And for me to say a prayer is remarkable. But the prayer was, I hope the fuck you know what you're doing. Amen. And that about sums it up. I had a faith in a higher power that could survive that kind of tragedy, not through anything I have done other than stick around and listen. And the next call was to my sponsor to say, I'm numb now, I don't need you now, but please be on alert, I'm probably going to call you later. And I didn't have to do it on my own. You can't buy that kind of peace of mind. I can't. I had all of the emotions, and that's the whole thing. There was no attempt to cover up the emotions. I was allowed to grieve. I was allowed to cry. I was allowed to feel the feelings. And I found that if you feel feelings, you don't have to do that over and over and over again. I had always thought that I was immune from feelings. I always thought I should be exempt and immune from life, actually. But the point is, 25 years of sobriety doesn't give you that. It may at 30, I don't know. I'm not there. My experience is that I get to participate fully in life. And it doesn't always go my way, but as I said, that 1 year when I went crazy, grieving the loss of a 21-year marriage, turned out to be the best year of my life in many ways. I don't know what's good for me, left to my own devices. I don't know what means anything. I have to turn that over to a higher power that I don't understand, that I can't see, smell, taste, or touch. But every so often I'm given little shots where I get to see how things fit together, and I realize the universe is unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to, without my help. It has been a hell of a ride, folks. It has had some beautiful moments. It has become more of a roller coaster. And I had been trying to use this program to make everything a flat line. No highs, no lows, smush them all together. I want calm and serenity. And that's not what I get. But I have a chance today to participate in my own life, to show up, and to experience the fullness of what's around me. That's a better deal than I'd ever asked for. A better deal than I could have ever expected. And it wasn't one that I planned. I would have to tell you that's the grace of God. That's the gift of having been here. And if I can't leave you with anything else, I'd like to leave you with this thought. No matter what happens, no matter what happens. You don't have to drink if you don't want to, and even if you want to, you don't have to take a drink. Thank you very much for listening.